forward to that as well. Rightio, so welcome to Lunch and Learn with Connect Her Collective. My name's Lee Cummins. I'm the founder of Connect Her, and each week I endeavour to bring somebody special onto the show so that you get to experience some great information. Hopefully it helps you, your business, and your personal development as well. So Kylie took a massive step just recently and has opened up her own Connect Her event in WA, and she is our leader for our Perth event. So welcome, Kylie. How are you?
Great. Thank you, Lee. Thanks for having me.
I'm very pleased. I said to you the other day, we need you on Lunch and Learn because you've got some interesting information, a lot that you share. And first of all, before we get started, who is Kylie Bonnor? Tell us a little bit about you.
Wow. So I am a mum of 3 and have, 2 of my kids have special needs. I'm a military wife. My husband's in the Defence Force and we move around the country a lot. So we were very lucky at the start of this year. We posted to Perth and from Wodonga. So I'm watching all my friends have a lot of emotional and physical and work-related turmoil at the moment. And just coming from Victoria, my husband was in Melbourne last year, right in the middle. So yeah, so I wear a lot of hats. I've got I'm on the national committee for the Military Wives Choir, and I am a creatrix transformologist is my day job, I suppose, but I'm very passionate about helping women. I've worked with women for nearly 20 years across a few businesses. So yeah, that's who I am.
Excellent. Now I want to hear a little bit more about the hats that you wear. So can you tell us a little bit more about those hats?
Oh, so which hats would you like to know about?
All of them. Because we as business women and mums and wives and sisters and daughters and all the hats that we wear, it can get challenging sometimes. So why don't, and I'm sure the ladies that are watching today, the live or watching the replay or even listening to the podcast, I'm sure all of them have many hats that they flick on and off on a regular basis. So tell us a little bit about your hat.
Yeah, so I guess my hats the only time I became aware of hats was probably 15 years ago actually, and I remember a business mentor of mine was telling me about the thinking hats, and there's all different coloured hats, and honestly I cannot remember what they were, but I remember the theory behind it was about how we can be emotional, or we can be dreamers, or we can be terribly really in deep dark thoughts, almost like quite pessimistic, I suppose, if you're thinking about it from a business perspective. But we need all of the hats because they all make us one. So I guess that's kind of stuck in my mind. So I guess it all began, my self-development journey, I suppose, all began because I met my husband at the time. We weren't married. But he was defence, so I moved from where we met in Canberra to Townsville to be with him, and so I was not single, but didn't have kids, and I didn't have a job, so I thought I'll just get into this direct selling thing to make a few friends. So that's where it all began. Well, direct selling, if anyone's ever done it, it's an incredible journey of self-development if you follow the journey and the career path. And the development is in you, but it's also in you developing other people in their business. So, because if you want to be successful, that's how a lot of the multi-level marketing and those sort of things become about. So I was doing that a lot, and still, we all have hats at all different stages. So I was still a wife and a partner. So I had my partner, and I was single. I had my dogs, I had my fur kids, and at the time, and I was a businesswoman, and I wanted to work. I was kind of driven. I was early 20s. And so that was kind of the start of the journey. But then when you go into that developing other people, you have to you have to develop yourself to be able to work with other people, because not everyone is like you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it's interesting that you talk about direct sales and multi-level marketing. I've always said that they're personal development companies with a product attached, because they really do work on your head, your thinking, your mindset, and it really does start you on that journey, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Anyone who does well in them is really good at the personal development stuff. I mean, there's some people who, I guess, come in and do really well on the product because they love the product for a very short space of time. And when I say short space of time, my company was one of the longest in Australia, so it had been around forever, and it was all about women helping women, and some of those women had been in there for 32 years, but if they weren't developing other people, if they weren't developing themselves, they sort of weren't developing other people. So they could do really well with part of the business of selling products, and they'd be amazing at selling products. They were fantastic salespeople, but they often were not getting what they wanted because they couldn't see that they needed to develop themselves personally. So, yeah.
And would you say that that was the transition, or that was the stepping stone into what you're doing now? Is that how that came about, or am I jumping the gun?
Hat.
Yes.
So the other hat was my children. So so as I said earlier, 2 of my kids have got special needs, and for a long period of time, for about 7 years, in amidst working and doing my thing and helping other women, I was trying to research to try and fix them.
As in fix your children, or fix other people in your business?
No, fix my children.
Okay, yeah.
So, and their special needs, which is and that's an interesting self-development in itself, because you can't, you can do everything you can, but you don't have control over that. So,
no.
So, yeah, so anyway, but I was doing a lot of research and working with a lot of very, very well-educated professors and of medicines, different types. I've got 2 different special needs. So we've got autism on the one hand, we've got epilepsy on the other hand. So working with all those people really gave me a lot of research. There was so much reading that I did, and talking to different people and working with all those people. I just kept coming up with brick walls and dead ends. And but I kept hitting this one about epigenetics. I had no idea what that was. But I just kept going. Everything was saying that science, the latest science, is epigenetics. And when we understand epigenetics, we'll be able to turn off the genes. So we'll be able to turn off the autism gene. Well, I don't know if you've ever known anyone with autism, but autism is not a genetic thing. There's no gene for autism. So how do you turn off a gene that isn't there?
Yeah.
But anyway, science was saying that one day we'll be able to. So, but no one really knew much about science. They knew about epigenetics, but they didn't know how that worked with people and stuff like that. So I kept getting these brick walls, and in the process of, then I was still working, trying to wear all the hats, trying to balance it all. I wasn't really achieving much. My grandmother got cancer and was given 6 months to live. My granddad had always been sick, so I moved back home to sort of look after the family and try and help them, get them set up so that when she died, that granddad wasn't, that he had Coles online or whatever set up, that I could get the groceries from 3 states away delivered to his door. And so life was going on, but nothing was going how I wanted it to be going. And I ended up having to step down from the managerial position in my role, just because I couldn't juggle the kids with their needs, my husband's work going away all the time, and everything.
And there's something that you missed there as well.
Oh, what's that?
Which is you.
Oh, yeah, well, exactly.
You're juggling kids. No. Where's Kylie? She's lost in being the mum and being the wife and being the carer from 3 states
exactly
away,
right.
And the manager, and working with her team. So there's a lot going on there, and we miss the most important person.
Yeah, well, if only you'd been in my life back then, maybe you would have pointed that out to me. But exactly. So, and as it went on, the more I tried to get help from doctors and things like that just weren't helping, and I was killing myself just trying to be all that and more to everyone, but not being me and looking after me. So yeah, so I ran away from home. I had a moment, had a hissy fit, and ran away from home for a month. And yeah, the rest, as they say, is history. Because while I was away, another colleague of mine said, "You've got to speak to this other colleague of ours because she's been developing a thing for women, and that'll help all your headspace." And I was like, "Oh, I'm too broken. No one can fix me, and it'll be okay because I've come away, and then when I go back, it'll all be better because I'll be better." But of course, I went back, and like I actually flew in after a month away. I flew in at 4 p.m. and my husband flew out at 6 o'clock the next morning, or maybe he was on the 6 o'clock plane, actually. I think it was like that night. So he picked me up and he left on probably the same plane in Albury. That's how that worked there. And a month later, it was exactly back to where it was before I went. I felt like I hadn't had a month's holiday. And I rang that friend and I rang the other friend that we'd been talking about. And yeah, so that's where I then, and she, actually, I didn't ring her straight away. She put a post on about epigenetics and how she was helping women change their epigenetics and that was changing their lives. And I was like, what? That's not possible because I've been looking at epigenetics for 7 years and no one's got answers. And how can you have answers? I was quite obnoxious about it. But yeah, so then that took me down a different rabbit warren. And a doctor at the time, she was saying that you've got to deal with trauma. And trauma for me at that point was that my kids had special needs and doctors weren't listening, and that was my trauma in its current impact. Not that I would have realised it then. I knew that they weren't listening and I was hitting dead ends, but yeah.
And it's interesting because actually my husband and I had this conversation just yesterday or the day before that, you know, you can move, like you ran away for a month and the view changes, but the problems and everything that's underlying all
like a big bag.
Yeah, it's on a bag. It's on your shoulder. You can't get rid of it. It follows you. And we were just talking exactly about that. We've got some friends that are planning to move interstate, and the problems never change until you address those. So we've actually had a question come in, which I'm going to get you to answer. It's from Jacqueline Smith. She's asked, Kylie, what steps did you take to build your personal support network? So I'll get you to answer that, and then I'm going to ask you to explain what epigenetics is. You've explained it to me. I understand it quite reasonably well now, reasonably. But I'll get you to answer that question, and then I'm going to ask you to please share with everybody what epigenetics is.
Yeah, so the steps I took to build my personal support network, honestly, that comes from working on me, to be honest. Like, so that I had to, I don't think I realised back then that I was very stubborn and that I didn't like asking for help. And I couldn't ask for help, I thought, because of our situation. We were never with family. I'd ask for help maybe with the kids, like to someone look after them if I had to, but only if I had to, or for work. So building my personal support network was really, I guess, about having that courage to admit that maybe I needed help. That was the first step. And then, taking the steps from there. So, like, but we move all the time. So that question, I'm not really sure what you want from, maybe Jacqueline, you could share which direction you want that to be in, because we move all the time. So I always have to build a personal support network. But yeah. So maybe if you don't mind, Jacqueline, if you could just clarify if it's about if it's the
physical or
if it's the every time we move thing, because I mean I've lived in 20 houses in 20 years, so I know exactly how to do that stuff. But but back to the question about epigenetics.
I'll just also add, sorry Kylie, and this is such a great subject. The other thing too is that we as women, and men do it as well, we don't ask for help because we've got to be the strong one. We've got to be the one that is the glue. Like, you've probably got to be the glue because hubby's got to go away. So you've got to make sure you're the glue for all the kids. You've got to be the glue for sick parents. You've got to be the glue for yourself. So you don't ask for help because well, I can't because I've got to keep everything together. And yeah.
Or you'll get someone else say no when you need it the most. Or people, And actually, I really want to say that that is such a perception. And until we change our perception, we can't be all that we want to be until we change our perception of ourselves and our perception of others. And I think that is the biggest gift for any woman, to figure that out. And to bring that into her body aligned. So head, heart and gut instinct, like bring all that together and into a knowing. Because if, as women, if we have, our heart is on track for believing that we should be able to ask for help, or we need help, or we want help, or we need a break, or whatever it is for women, our heart might say that and tell us, or our head actually, you know, when we get overwhelmed and our head's saying you need to take a break or else you're going to get a break. But our heart sits there and says, no, but I've just got to do this one more thing for the kids, and I've got to make the costume for the what do you play at school tomorrow, or dress up thing, or whatever it is. So you will push harder, but your gut instinct saying, if I do something else then this will happen. And actually what tends to happen is we listen to one and ignore the others for our own reasons, which are epigenetics, which we'll get to that in a minute. But and we forget that if they were all in alignment, actually everything happens much easier and everything happens really beautifully. So
they're all singing the same song.
Yeah, it's almost like you're on a train track. Just imagine like a three-way train track, and your head and your heart and your gut. And if your wheels aren't aligned to the three of them, then you're going in, like the train can't go anywhere actually, because it goes in all different directions.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of comments. Esther, sometimes we don't ask for help because we think people won't understand, or they judge us, or think we're just complaining. Very true. And what happens if we fall apart? What then? So very, very poignant points there.
Yeah, so epigenetics.
Yes,
so,
let us find out all about it.
So because Esther's comment really brings me back to that, because so epigenetics, in the simplest term, is actually, if everyone knows about DNA, epigenetics, that's your DNA is your gene, your genetics. Epigenetics is the thing that wraps around the outside that tells that DNA when to turn on and off, or how to act, or how to behave. It's the energy compound, I suppose you'd say, to make that, fire that piston on, turn it off. So epigenetics, when we look at Esther's comment about, what did she say about that people won't understand or they'll judge us, that again is our perception. But the epigenetics of that is the inherited traits that work with that. So you might have a thing about someone judging you. Generally, that hasn't come from you. That comes through our ancestral line and our inherited stuff. Now, your epigenetics is the inherited stuff that is like the knowing of the genes how to work. So when your mum and your dad come together, they put your DNA together. But how do you have those gut instincts and that knowing is because of this incredible phenomenon of this epigenetic, the epigenome that sits around the DNA that tells it how to act and behave. Because we've actually got the same amount of DNA as a tree, but what makes us a human being that thinks and acts and does, whereas they're just a tree. And I say just a tree, I love trees, but they are just a tree. Yeah. So whereas we can move, we can think, we can do, we can be, we can feel, and everything like that. So the DNA is not the thing that makes us smart and who we are as human beings is our epigenetics.
Now, I really got it. You've explained it to me a couple of times in the past, particularly when I first met you over in Perth when we had that meeting of what is epigenetics. And it sort of, I listened, but I didn't really take it in. And what really cemented it for me was I've been watching that show on SBS, which is Who Do You Think You Are? And they had Julie Bishop on, you know, the politician. And she had been researching her mother's side and she didn't know anybody from there. And some of the traits that came up, she said, oh my gosh, that is where I must have got it from my great-great-grandfather twice removed sort of thing. And I just went, oh, that's epigenetics. You know, like it's that, because obviously, you know, you get, like if you put my mum next to me, we look alike. I've got the same hands as her. Yes, we can get all of that coming down through our DNA, but I really got it when I, you know, was watching that show. Yes, all those memories, all those things that our ancestors have gone through has to have come through. That's how we get some of the things that we get. Why can you have somebody that can sing beautifully, but both parents are tone deaf? Like it's got to have come from somewhere through the makeup of the person.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing to remember, that science, for all the wonderful things that science can do for us, it totally disregarded who we are as human beings for a long time because they knew about genetics and DNA. And they were actually taking that coil off to study the DNA. And if you just think about, like I'm a real passionate advocate for men and women and who they are. And I don't say men and women as in that there's only two genders or anything like that. I don't come into the gender thing. But if you're born with a uterus, your cells are all female cells and they look at things differently. So your eyes see the world differently to what a male sees the world. His eyes are different. The cells in his eyes see things in periphery. He is the protector. He has to watch for the saber-toothed tiger jumping out of the trees and be strong and able to fight and carry on all day. Women, we can fight, and we've evolved to these people who can fight, and we're very good at it. But our nature is not about fighting. Our nature is we can cover everything in one. Like we can look around a room and just know everything. We've got to be able to cook the meal and keep a kid from falling in the creek, because, you know, we're there to nurture and protect and to teach and to guide. Now, when you come to giving birth, so yes, you've got a sperm and an egg. And interestingly, my favourite fascinating fact about the human body is that an egg is the largest cell in the human body and a sperm is the smallest cell. But, just fascinating fact, but then that is implanted into a uterus, which is in the woman's body. So you might have 50-50 coming together to make a baby, but then you've got 9 months of 100% being the woman and her learnings and her knowings to help us to evolve to be better beings, smarter, safer, all that stuff. And if you disregard that fact, you're disregarding everything that science has kind of created. So science didn't know about epigenetics for a long time because it didn't understand it, and it still doesn't understand it, which is kind of good, but it's kind of terrible for us because we forgot who we were designed to be, and we were designed to be these amazing human beings. And until we remember that, sometimes we forget who we are and how we're meant to be. We're meant to not have issues, and we're not meant to have depression for 10 years of our lives or 20 or 30 years. We're not meant to have that sort of stuff. We're meant to have it, move through it, and be on to the next thing. And like anxiety, you're meant to have anxiety because the saber-toothed tiger might be there, but it's not meant to rule your life forever.
It's a small snippet of time for that particular issue or situation that's occurred, not a long, intense period of anxiety. Yeah, I get that.
Any emotion, like joy.
Yeah.
You're meant to have joy. You're meant to have, but everything's opposite, isn't it? It's a pendulum. It's got to be balanced. And so you're meant to have joy, but you're also meant to have sadness. Like, we weren't being born as humans to not have anyone die on us. Like, we're supposed to know about death and grief, and but to know death and grief, you also then know the depth of love and sharing and all that humanity stuff.
Yeah, like if you didn't have sadness in your life, you're not going to appreciate the joy that comes in, because you don't know, you know, it's the yin and the yang, the black and the white. There's complete opposites and to it all. So so Kylie, you work with women, particularly those that are in the forces or in I can't think of it.
Emergency services.
Emergency services, yeah. But you also work with business women.
Yeah.
Primarily women. How does epigenetics work and assist business women?
Yeah, so epigenetics, so sometimes it's just the education of knowing that stuff. And if you know that stuff, then you can understand why it's there or how it works. But I also work with women and business women with teaching them about the female cycle. So one thing that we are in life taught a lot as women, it's certainly through my generation, so I'm trying to change that with my daughter's generation, but she's still being taught the same stuff, is that we have our period from day when we're about 13 years old, puberty, till menopause. And that's it. Well, actually, as women, we have a cycle from the day we're born to the day we die. And no one knows that, and no one teaches that. And until people understand that cycle and then understand how to work with that cycle and work that cycle as women, as I was saying before, we're amazing at being able to do all and be all and wear all those hats and do all that. But we're not designed to be able to do that. We're not designed with the testosterone that keeps our hormones there so that we can go all day and then sleep and then do it again the next day. We are this flowing up and down cycle of that. And then when you understand that cycle, the amazing thing is that you don't push yourself when you're in the space of that you should be sort of resting a bit more. Like, we often know that we should be resting, but we have to get these things done. So you push yourself and then you end up crashing when you could be working really, 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 really intensely productively. And I've got a little bug thing flying around me, sorry. So just knowing that for women in business is freedom, because you don't then give yourself the guilt trip. Oh, I should have got this done, this done, this done. Whereas actually, you know that you should be watching Netflix for 3 days a month so that you can just rest your body, because that's what your body needs, so that it can go 100% the next 3 weeks. But we don't do that. We're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's interesting. When I don't know, I was probably from about 4 to 30, I suffered from severe, debilitating, like hospitalisation migraines. And it was primarily around that hormonal period of time. And I would push, because I had a high pressure job, particularly, you know, from my 20s to 30 and beyond, where I'd push myself and then I'd come crashing down, and I'd be off for 4 days with a migraine in hospital or, you know, emergency and what have you. If I'd known, which I did know that it was based around my hormones, but if I thought, I'm just going to take it easy for those days and then power on around those days, it would have made life so much simpler. If I'd had you around then, I would have known.
I know. Well, and that was my thing. So for all those years that I worked with women in business, I was telling them that they should be going for their production, and they should be pushing themselves to do this and this every single time. And there's actually times of the month, like, you know, indirect sales, you've got to talk to people. Well, there's times of the month that you're really good at talking to people and you want to talk to people and you're happy to talk to people, even if you don't like people. You are much more productively talking to people, as opposed to in those other times, you're not going to get the results you want just because your energy isn't where you, as a businesswoman, we believe it should be here all the time. We don't make allowances that actually, if this week we just did some stuff that was a bit more creative and a bit more quiet, worked on my business instead of in my business, something like that. Just that simple little adjustment actually then makes this phenomenal difference in business for women, for them, for their and that then infects or ripples out to their personal beliefs about themselves and their goals and their dreams. I don't like the word goals for women because it pushes us out of that space of knowing and being in flow with who we are and just understanding ourselves and giving ourselves a break. But the words in business is very much like that. So because then we achieve them and we achieve them easily, and so then we're more happy. And so when we're more happy, we go home and guess what? Everyone's happier. And
Yes.
the world ticks along better and everything's great.
Excellent. And that's so true. If we can get to that point where it's all melding together, because people go, oh, it's the work-life balance. Well, it's actually just life balance. Work and life are one in the same. It's all your life. So
yeah, well, it's just
about,
life, isn't it? It's
not
even balance. It just is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, I'm just going to go to some of the comments. Jacqueline's come back and she said, it's important to have a support network in our lives, regardless of what we do. I'm interested to know, when did your mindset change to say, I need help or someone to talk to? Managing family business and a husband that is away a lot would put extra strain on yourself.
Yeah, so when I ran away from home and I met up with my colleague, her name was Jen, and she told me to speak to Naz. And so, of course, I came back and everything wasn't the same. And then by the next month, I was like, okay, I've got to do something. And it all came at the same time that I'd gone to the doctor and asked for the happy pills because I wasn't coping, and that was it. And I had this amazing doctor who was very trauma informed and stuff, and she said, look, you've got this far and you've put up with so much worse than what you're dealing with now. Like it really was, I'd come through this massive hump. She's very NLP trained, so she was like, let's just give it another week and then we can look at the meds. And in that week, then we're going to do a parenting class to make you feel better. Well, the parenting class got cancelled. So when you're relying on that one thing, and that doesn't work. So, and that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes you're relying on one person or one thing. It might be one friend, it might be something, and then they let you down as well when you're in that mind space. So I decided that I had nothing left to give or nothing left to lose. Now, in hindsight, at the time, I didn't think I was quite there because that's why I went and got the drugs so that they'd help me. But in hindsight, I think I was possibly getting borderline, maybe suicidal. At the time, I hadn't said anything about it though, but I just know that a few things happened in the next few weeks that I would never have survived if I hadn't had the next step in place. So having that next step, and I booked in to have a breakthrough with Creatrix, and that was the thing. And Creatrix works on the sort of 3 levels of the mind: the conscious and the unconscious and the subconscious. So the conscious mind, as I'll say to my clients, is the stuff. The conscious is, you want it to change. You don't want to live in that shitty time all your life. You want it to change. You might want it, but your subconscious kind of puts things out there that doesn't quite make it happen. Then your unconscious mind, its whole job is to keep you safe and alive. So you've actually got to get them all 3 into a space that then you can move forward. And what happened is that I guess I made that decision that if I hadn't have made that decision, I know I wouldn't be here now, because I wouldn't have been able to continue like I was. So yeah. So
thank you for sharing that. And there's a lot of people that get into that dark space where they just don't, there's no light, they can't see a way out or a way forward. So it's great that you had some things in place to take you to that way forward.
Yeah, I guess I just had enough people, just the right people who really breathed that belief into me that there was another option. But I had nothing left to lose, actually. I think I was at that space that, if it didn't work, then I'd just go and do that.
Yeah.
That's terrible to be in that space.
It's scary, yeah.
But there's so many people out there. Like I didn't think at the time, I thought that was really abnormal. But now I've seen so many people, and it may not be quite that severe, But oftentimes it's just that we just go along with things as they are because even though we don't like it, women stay with husbands that don't dote on them and love them because they think that they're not worth anything more and they won't get anything better. Like, that's not how it should be.
No, and look, I have family members that have taken their own lives and they just couldn't find a way out, and it's probably more prevalent than we actually realise, and it's good that there's opportunities out there to shine a light and do some things to help ourselves. So a couple of points from Esther. First of all, how does hysterectomy change things? But if you still have your ovaries, should things be the same?
Yeah, so I can do a whole webinar on that one. So hysterectomy takes out the uterus. If you've still got your ovaries, the hormones are still going, but you don't have the clearance of the shedding of the cells of the blood and stuff, so the renewing. I'm a big believer that periods are really empowering now. I didn't used to be, but when you understand the cycle of it, it's such a beautiful system that we have, that we can shed every single month and not die. Like, imagine if you lost that much blood. Any other thing, you'd be quite a sick person. So if you've had a hysterectomy, if you have a complete hysterectomy, you're still a female at the core of you. It may bring up other stuff around, but that'll be about personal and self-beliefs and stuff. If you have still got your ovaries, like, it's all connected. So our brain still is wired as if we have our uterus. The hormones will still be reacting if you've still got your ovaries, so you'll still have that chemical interaction, hormonal. The ovaries release a thing which then releases the pituitary gland, which releases the adrenals. Like, everything's all connected. So if you take one thing away, it does change how it works within you, but it doesn't actually change the cells in that belief. So it actually works for anyone if they've had menopause, or if they've had a hysterectomy, if they do choose to live transgender and they want to live as a man because they don't want to be a woman, then that it still works if you were born with a uterus versus if you weren't born with a uterus. It's a totally different system of how we see the world and how the world is perceived by us. So yeah, so it doesn't change, and our cycle still actually happens. It's just a different cycle. So I have some of my clients, if they are past beyond menopause or they've had a hysterectomy, I give them a different worksheet maybe to track their cycle with their hormones if they need it. Depends on who they are and where they're at.
Excellent. Esther has also put, it's about hitting rock bottom and it becomes your normal, which is true. Yeah. You develop yourself to your normal, which is what we're doing with lockdown, isn't it? We're adjusting to our new normal, and exactly the same. You don't know any different.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, actually, I'll just challenge you on that, Lee, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? The people who aren't coping with lockdown or don't like lockdown, it's because it is a new normal, and that it's because they do know something different. That's the same with your body. So with epigenetics, that's exactly the thing. You might have believe something and do something, and you've had the evidence shown to your reticular activation system in your brain, which is your unconscious brain's way of showing you what you need to see to believe what you believe. While you have that evidence, then you have the thing about this sort of a thing when it's a change. So the reason lockdown's so severe is because we do know a different thing. And that's where epigenetics is. It's our body's knowing of things, whereas our brain shows us other things.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know if I explained that very well, but it's like the knowing versus the understanding. Like, you might understand why you should have to, like, everyone probably understands kind of why they should be staying at home and doing the right things and all those things that the government's trying to get people to do. But then when that doesn't happen, because of all the reasons why, like, people, if they've been in prison, they're not going to like lockdown. They're going to fight lockdown, and they're going to, that's very much, I mean, it might be this lifetime for some of them if they're refugees, but if you have lived a normal, probably Australian upbringing, that you've had freedom and you've had, you know, we have quite a beautiful life over here. We don't have people armed with guns standing at the shop doors and stuff like that, like they do in a lot of countries. So if you've had that upbringing, then you do know it's a different thing, but why doesn't your body like it? And that's because it's probably experienced something like it before and it fights against that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Excellent. So Jacqueline's come back and she said, thank you for sharing. I guess it's part of changing our behaviours and knowing what we're doing is not the right way, but being honest with ourselves for change.
Yeah, and embracing the change, because as hard as it can be, it leads to the biggest, most beautiful transitions for us, especially as women. Like, we're used to big, bold transitions. Like, our bodies know about, like, we can create a baby and we can push it out in 9 months, you know. Our body knows transition, and it knows that even every month. If you look at our cycle, our body knows the transition and the way it works. If we don't embrace that cycle, then we push against it and we don't get what we, well, it just is harder to push against it. It's harder to defy something than it is to just go with it.
And which leads me to Esther's comment of flexibility. So
yeah,
yes. Now, I think we've had a good conversation about epigenetics. I hear that you have got a book coming out soon. Tell me about that.
I'm talking to my publisher about that one. So it's been a bit waylaid this year. So anyway, I've got a beautiful book coming out called Brave Bitches, and it's the stories of women like me, so women in the emergency services and defence who are living a life that they didn't sign up for necessarily. Like, we chose it, I suppose, because we married our husbands, maybe you might say, but or we signed up maybe to serve in the ambulance or police or defence or whatever, and we end up on a path that maybe we didn't ever understand or realise. So I'm just telling those stories that sort of shine the light on the people who are supporting the people who are doing the job. I guess this year's been quite a good example of that. Like, I think we've had more light shine on those sort of roles before this year because of Corona. Like, that's quite a beautiful thing that we've had people stopping and thinking about who are the people behind those people. So we've got the nurses and the doctors in the hospitals this year. Behind them are their families. And, you know, most of them have made sacrifices, you know, like they've said, it's been quite public that they've chosen to send their children to other family members or whatever so that they don't infect them, which is quite noble. But actually, that's what defence and the emergency services do all the time.
Yes, it's interesting. Again, I've just had this conversation recently where, you know, there's over here in Melbourne, the home of AFL football, I say that very loosely, where they're sending all the football teams off to go in a hub for a month or 6 weeks or something to, you know, so that they can play football. And it's like it's the worst thing ever. And the fact is that, like, the cricketers do that every year. The defence services do that every single day that they get sent to a different location, and it could be overseas, it could be in much, you know, they're not living a lifestyle of a, you know, a beautiful setting of a 5-star hotel with, you know, golf course and the whole bit.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh gee, you poor hard done by boys. So, you know, I mean, that's just flippant as far as I'm concerned for them, but it does shine a light on that people are making sacrifices away from their families, or, as you say, parents are saying, I have to send my children to another household so that I don't infect them. You've got husbands and wives that are staying elsewhere and not going back to the family home so that they don't infect their full family, which also means that that other parent has to take on the role of 2 parents. So, and their kids have got to sacrifice. They're not seeing mum or dad on a regular basis. So I think it's a fantastic thing that you're doing, shining these lights on people that it's always happened, but we haven't necessarily acknowledged it and shine the light on it. So
yeah, Esther's saying about fires, flood, corona. Yeah, so the latest thing for defence is that they've got 10 hours sometimes notice of going to corona now this last couple of days. But you know that the football guys kicking up a stink was very
hilarious.
Well, it was heavily discussed among the spouses.
Yeah.
But
been a topic of conversation at our household too.
Yeah, I do feel for them. Like, it's so funny because I'm an old hat at that. Like, I can do that with my eyes closed. I don't like it at all, but I can do it. And most military wives are exactly the same. Like, you know, we live in a Navy town actually now, so we're Army, and the Navy chicks are hardcore. Like, the wives, they're hardcore. They go away and they can't even contact you. Whereas at least when the Army goes away, usually they have the comms set up fairly quickly that you can hear from them now sort of fairly regularly. Like, I mean, 20 years ago it wasn't quite like that, but you hear from them fairly regularly. So I mean, if they're here in corona in Australia or the bushfires, they could still call home and be a bit more present, but then that takes them away from doing their work and stuff. So I guess it's the amount of time that they get, and I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's this corona snuck up on everyone. If everyone had a year to plan for corona, then they would have all been like, okay, this is the plan, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it. But I mean, we met, and then the next week corona was the thing. Like we knew it was a thing, but it wasn't a thing, and then suddenly it was a thing.
Well, we met, and I went home that night, and there was talk that they were going to close down the borders. And I'm like, close down the borders? Oh, this is stupid. What's going on? And I flew out, and the next Saturday the borders were closed. So and that was in March. So this has all happened. We haven't had notice.
In the space of 4 months or something.
Yeah, we haven't had the time to build the shed and put all the toilet paper in there.
Yeah. Damn it.
Yeah. Oh,
we should have now.
Yeah, exactly. Kylie, this has been such an interesting conversation, and I really do thank you for sharing your journey with us and being so open as well. And I would like everybody that if you're interested in finding out more about what Kylie does, just go to her Facebook page. Is it a page or a group?
That one that I sent you was a page. Yeah, so Reignite the Fire Within. Yeah.
So it's a Facebook page. We'll put it in the comments. Reignite the Fire Within. And there's a whole lot of information there that you'll be able to get in touch with Kylie. And we'll also put the links in the show notes on our podcast and also in the Connect Her Collective, so that you can get as much information about Kylie as possible. So is that the best place for people to contact you and Kylie?
Yeah, it is at the moment because the website's having a bit of a revamp and stuff. So yeah, that'd be great.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all of that information, and I think it was just really fantastic what you were able to share with us.